I had the most magical year going back to school when I was 29, and I had just met the man who would then become my husband, and so it was a really exciting time of kind of learning this whole new skill and being good at it. And I think for a long time I hadn't felt that good at something because it hadn't quite worked out with acting, and I didn't really want to be a banker, so it just felt great to be writing and being creative.
You found your calling.
I found my calling, exactly. It fitted. It felt really right. I was in my flow, so to speak.
Hello and welcome to the Women of the Future podcast, a podcast made in collaboration with the Women of the Future programme, a platform built to unlock a culture of kindness and collaboration among leaders, as well as support and celebrate the successes of women. I'm Kim Rowell and I won the media category at their awards in 2018 in recognition of my continued work as a commissioner, producer and children's author, particularly within the mental health remit. I'll be talking to my guests on this podcast about their careers, who or what gave them their first big break, their successes, failures and inspirations along the way, and how they came to be a part of the Women of the Future network. Naomi Kerbel is Global Head of TV and Radio Scheduling at Bloomberg. Whilst studying Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic at Cambridge University, she put her passion for the performing arts to good use as a member of the renowned theatrical club Footlights. A self-confessed compulsive doer, Naomi is also an ambassador for the British Red Cross and host of her own podcast series, Show Me the Way. She was shortlisted for a Women of the Future award in 2013 in the media category.
So I grew up in the outskirts of London, Twickenham, Kingston, that sort of area. But when I was 2, we went to Miami, Florida. My dad got a job over there, and so we relocated, and I don't have many memories of that time, but it did inspire me a total love of that kind of Art Deco architecture and bright colours and vibrancy. And I came back with an American accent, and my grandmother, who's no longer with us, used to chastise me for saying, "Can I have a glass of water?" And I'd say, "No, Naomi, may I have a glass of water?"
How old were you when you came back?
I was 4 or 5.
Okay.
So it's only a couple of years.
But those are the formative years.
It really was, when you were listening and
yeah.
parroting back. So that was great fun. And then I grew up there. And then my dad was very ill when I was younger. So he had kidney failure, which he had diagnosed when he was 18. And it was from a throat infection. It was sort of 1 in, 500,000 people might get that. And it meant that he dialyzed at home, and it wasn't a great environment for me to grow up in. Although, I loved being with my family, it was deemed probably better if I went away to school. Okay. Now, my parents couldn't afford that, but I managed to get scholarships and bursaries and various things. So from the age of 10, I went to boarding school, and it was amazing. I totally loved it. I was one of those stories of people who just adored that time away.
Because you do hear stories, the antithesis of that.
Of course.
I hated going, I didn't want my parents to send me, but you sound like you flourished.
I really did flourish. I was in an idyllic setting on Beachy Head, of all places, in Eastbourne, in Sussex, and I had a lovely 3 years there. And then at that stage, my dad had a kidney transplant, and touch wood, we're now verging on 30 years since that transplant. So he's an absolutely remarkable case. So I could have come home, but I was really enjoying it, and I was actually still an actress then, so I sort of omitted that. But when I was 6, I said to my mum that I wanted to be an actress.
What did she say?
Really precocious. Well, she never does anything by half, so she found the best acting agency in London, which at the time was a school called Sylvia Young's, which is still going. Alumni like Amy Winehouse and Adele and Billy Piper. So I went there from the age of 6, and in fact my first day, it was a Saturday morning class when I was doing like tap and modern or something, and Jackie Patton, who was one of the big agents there, said, "Well, actually, Naomi, there's an audition up the hall. Why don't you head up there and see how you get on?" And it was an audition for Les Mis.
Wow.
So I was cast in Les Mis and was at the Palace Theatre when I was 6, so that was 1986.
Cosette?
I was actually Eponine.
Who's the really little one?
Cosette,
That's it, yeah.
And so I did do some Cosette as well, because you all so I was Cosette in the Royal Variety Show in 86, so I met the Queen.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
You
it was
must have a remarkable singing voice.
Well, I did. I mean, I only sing now like nursery rhymes to my daughter, but it's one of those things that I think in life, when you have time, you can pick these things back up. So it's still there. But it's
met the Queen?
I met the Queen, yeah, and I was really disappointed because she wasn't wearing her jewels. But I did a curtsy, and it was amazing. I mean, I actually found a YouTube clip of it recently, and it brought back all the memories. It was incredible. But as I said, I then went to boarding school, and I kind of continued with that in school holidays, and my grandma would chaperone me when my mum and dad were working. And that was a really fun experience. It did sort of mean that when I went to my secondary school that I had a bit of a reputation of being a bit precocious, as you would, although I didn't feel I was being precocious. I think that even having that background makes you stand out. And I think I managed to find some really great friends, but it wasn't... I mean, I fitted in fine because I did a lot of sport, but I think that I found ways to adapt, to get on with people. And I think that's something that boarding school definitely teaches you, how to manage, tricky situations.
Yeah, because I guess there's no escape.
No, there's no escape at all.
So you have to almost confront whatever issues
you do.
That you're faced with.
You do, and I think that I faced some bullying, but later, sort of sixth form, and that was really confronting. And I remember one particular scenario that was really, it was quite a kind of sexualised situation with a boy of my age, and that was really hard because I didn't want to let it go, because I thought, we're about to go to university and you can't think that this behaviour is normal. Nothing actually physically happened to me, but I was sort of threatened in a way up against a wall, and it was about me being nice actually, but it felt quite violent, and because of the way I was being kind of pressed against the wall, it felt quite sexual right afterwards.
You were a teenager?
Yeah, I was 16, 17 with a boy who was that sort of age, and I just thought, I don't think that this is fair on other women if he goes off to university and thinks that he can behave like this. So I did talk to somebody, one of my teachers, about it, who arranged a meeting between us, a kind of mediation almost, which was probably one of the scariest things I'd ever done, probably still have ever done, where you have to kind of confront as a victim, you can confront the person who's victimised you. But it was quite liberating, and I think that although he denied it, actually, it was like early gaslighting. He did take it on board, I think, and I hope it didn't, change his behaviour in the future. But yes, that is something that you do face at boarding school, that you are confronted with these things all the time.
I'm sure the very fact that he was in that room with you and there was a mediator would have, if it wasn't visual in that moment, I'm sure he took that away with him, and you would hope, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd
like
hope.
you say, but you don't want him to get away with it.
No.
Why should he?
Yeah. But equally, you don't want a stupid mistake and someone being full of testosterone and bravado and all of those hormones rushing around to dictate his whole life, because actually I'm sure that incident could have been really dramatic for him.
Yeah. So you then went on
You didn't think the interview was going to go there?
No, I didn't. This isn't, so you then went to uni? Or?
Yeah, so I went to uni. I think one thing that characterises me is that I, like my mother, don't do things by half. So I only applied to one university. I applied to Cambridge. My thought behind that was, I'm just going to go for this one for the first year. If I don't get in, I'll have a gap year and I'll think through what I want to do with my life.
So you did have a plan B?
Vaguely, but I totally believed that I would get in. Now, I totally believed I could get in because I think a bit like being an actor, you have to totally believe there are no other options.
Right.
So you'd
learnt that skill almost.
So I learned that skill of you trust. And I'm a really spiritual person. I'm half Catholic, half Jewish, so I have a really strong faith in God. And so I really trusted that if that dream had been placed in my heart, it was something that I could fulfill.
Yeah.
And I was also really strategic. So I applied for a course that only had about 15 places, but had a lot less applicants than, say, English or French and Italian, which were my other options.
I think it's like Nordic.
Yes, Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, yeah. So
that's very different.
It was really different, and it wasn't an easy course to get into. The interviews were as tough as you would imagine. I'd done French, English and Latin for A-level, so it was well set for me. The history I found particularly tricky. I'd never been good with numbers and dates, but I loved it. I really, really loved it. In my first year, I did the Footlights and went up to Edinburgh, and that was an incredible experience. Met some wonderful people, really great friends. So yeah, that was my time at university.
That sounds brilliant. So then what set you off on your career trajectory?
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to be a famous comedy actress, to be honest.
Okay.
And
Still time?
yeah, well, no, I don't think I want that anymore. But I mean, there are elements of it that I still hanker after a bit. Certainly the applause and the people laughing at you. I really enjoyed people laughing at me. When I was doing Footlights, I did something called clowning, which is a form of comedy. I always played this kind of stupid one. And that's great fun because you're really liberated in that role.
But your daughter loves that now.
Yeah, she does. We have a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
I mean, she is a real comedian. She's only 2.5, but she definitely shows
Potential.
potential. Yeah, definite potential, if not desire. So, no, I left university really believing that it would work out for me. And to a certain extent it did. I think if I'd have stuck at it, I would have been a good jobbing actress. But that in itself is a really hard path to tread. It's not easy to be a good jobbing actress. It takes a lot of tenacity. And there are lots of bits in between. I was at an event recently where we were talking about men and in the creative arts and suicide. And one guy was talking about the fact that his last job was in May and he won't work again until December. But there have been, and that's quite regular work, but there have been times in his life where he hasn't worked for 2 to 3 years. And you think about the toll that takes on your mental health, and not just that, but your status. Exactly. Yeah. When we live in a capitalist society that demands that your worth is characterised by how much you earn, especially coming from a university like Cambridge.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the first things we ask people is like, what do you do? And if you say, I'm an actor, you can say I'm an actor, but then immediately someone will say, what was the last thing that you...
Yeah, so it's almost, what are you working on?
Yeah, it is. Maybe it's a British thing, and that's how our social chats, that's how it evolves, so we can literally just ask that question.
Well, it's better than the American, how much do you earn? I think that's... but I think it's a good question to ask. I think it's a question that we should all be asking each other and be freely open to. I know... we sign contracts with companies. Certainly with my company, I wouldn't do that, but I think we do need to be talking about salary ranges a lot more.
Yeah, I agree, because people just don't, and they just assume what other people are earning, which is worse in a sense, because you need to get it completely wrong.
And actually, the BBC having to reveal pay has been a great thing for the industry, the media industry as a whole, because people can finally go, oh, right, I get it. Okay, that's how much that person earns, and therefore that's what I can aim towards, or... Makes
it tangible.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there a moment or a person that you would say gave you your big break?
My big break? I mean, I think my journey pivoted in 2006 when I realised that I wasn't going to be an actress anymore. I'd started temping in the city and I was earning okay money, but I couldn't earn like the bonuses and stuff like that because I was only a temp. And my friend gave me, my best friend from Cambridge gave me that break.
Right.
And said, come along and do this. And I really enjoyed that time. But in 2009, the financial crisis happened. And I found myself out of that job. And although actually just a few months later, I was called back again and asked if I wanted to do something similar again within that company, I'd already made this decision to move into journalism. I'd always been interested in storytelling throughout my whole kind of creative life. But at that stage, I thought I wanted to be a presenter. And I went to see Jeremy Vine.
Did you?
And he was such a lovely, lovely man.
How did that come about? Because you can't just rock up to Jeremy Vine?
Well, do you know, well,
Was it
sort of
like
you
that?
can, because I just sent him an email. It was quite easy to figure out his email.
Yeah, Jeremy.Vine.
Jeremy.Vine. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's very easy to find out. And he was just so kind and sent me, he clearly had got these requests many, many times before and sent me a bit of blurb that he'd put into a Word document about, you know, what it really takes to be a journalist or an on-air broadcast journalist. So these were kind of words that I had never come across before. I didn't know how to even break into this industry. I didn't really know that people who did that,
Whether this was an option.
Yeah, or that people who were presenters were journalists. I didn't, at that stage, I had no idea. So I went and shadowed him for a day, and he was just so charming and made it all seem possible, and told me about how most people do it, which is to do what I almost called a conversion, like you would do for law, but you do a master's in or a postgraduate diploma in journalism. So I decided to do that, and I did it at what was previously called the London College of Printing and is now the University of Arts London College of Communication in Elephant. And I had the most magical year going back to school when I was 29, and I had just met the man who would then become my husband, and so it was a really exciting time of kind of learning this whole new skill and being good at it. And I think for a long time I hadn't felt that good at something because it hadn't quite worked out with acting, and I didn't really want to be a banker, so it just felt great to be writing and being creative.
So you found your calling.
I found my calling, exactly. It fitted, it felt really right. I was in my flow, so to speak. So then I left, and in fact I had a job before I left, and I worked for CNBC for a year. Because one of the things that sort of upset me, but I understood, was I did an internship at Sky News, where I eventually ended up for nearly 5 years. And they said to me, they gave me the best career advice I'd ever had, which was, you may want to escape the ghetto of finance, but your CV reads like a financial journalist.
Right.
So we would suggest that you think about
do.
joining the business team. So I went to CNBC. I then there were no opportunities at Sky at that point in 2010, and in 2011 a spot opened up, and I became business news editor for Sky. After a while, you know, I worked on the Jeff Randall programme, who was at the Telegraph for years. I then got promoted to business news editor, and I then got headhunted to move over to Bloomberg, which is where I am now. So that happened 4.5 years ago.
It's all very exciting.
Yeah.
What happens? It sounds, so when you reel it off like that, it sounds like it happened really quickly, but I'm sure there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that went into all of that.
There was a lot. I mean, there's a lot of time when you're in it where you think, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here.
It's life in
You
general.
know,
sometimes.
yeah. I remember walking to work in the city in floods of tears, going, this is not what my life was meant to be. But I think that Tim Cook gave a really great speech at a graduation ceremony, I think for Harvard, where he talks about the dots, joining the dots in your life, and you can never join the dots in a forward way, it's always retrospective. So I tell this story, my story, like it's a continuous flow that makes total sense, but at the time I could just follow my instinct and it felt right in that moment. And the same thing, I have a podcast as well, and that was also very instinctive. When I had my little girl, I was on maternity leave, and I really felt that I needed to have an outlet, and I'd been mulling a podcast for a long time. I wanted to hear more of women's stories, and that's exactly what you're doing now, which is amazing. So I'm really pleased that that's happening in force now, but at the time I wanted to hear how other women had done it. That gave me an outlet, and so that's what I've been doing for a couple of years now as well.
So how did you first hear about the Women of the Future programme?
Oh, wow. I think it was a simple Google search. I think it might have shown up. And
What were you
I think
searching
it's a
for?
long time ago. That's a really good question. How did I hear about it? It feels like it's like part of my DNA now, and it's become a big part of my kind of equality story, and about what I really want to see in the world. And Pinky's formed a big part of that. So I can't quite remember.
But you won an award.
I was shortlisted, which I think in Women of the Future terms is as good, because it's what you do with it. I was in the same category that year as Emma Barnett, who's gone on to Five Live, Muse Night, Women's Hour. She's just written a book, Period, which I urge listeners to read. It's really important. It was an amazing year, and actually what Pinky has done with the kind of kindness aspect of the Women of the Future Awards and the network she's created has been a massive benefit to me in my career. When I made the transition from one job to another, in fact, it was by having that seal of approval of the Women of the Future shortlisting that enabled me or empowered me to ask for a lot more money when I went into my new job. So I think that is a very important part of what this gives you.
Yeah.
Just gives you a little bit of, it gives you a bit of a wind beneath your wings.
Self-belief.
Yeah, it does.
Some quick fire questions.
Oh, good Lord, okay.
They're quite loaded, so...
Okay, God.
What would you describe as your greatest success?
Having my baby. Emmeline, as in Pankhurst, yeah, she's remarkable.
I think
Of
my
course.
daughter's the same age. I've got a little girl called Florence.
Oh, gorgeous name, 2.5.
Yeah.
Oh.
She's 3 in October. So getting older.
Same school year.
Yeah, such a character. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And you see little bits of yourself and you think, oh, do I like that bit?
I know exactly what you mean. And your greatest failure?
My greatest failure. Oh, God, I'm one of these really annoying people that kind of views failure as, you know...
It's a tough word. Every time I ask someone, it's a challenge.
Oh, general studies A-level. really, really bad at that.
Yeah, same.
What was the point of that?
The time I did it was all about economics and things like that, and I was like, I wanted to do economics.
Yeah, that would have been useful for me.
Yeah, right. So the mantra of the Women of the Future is kindness and collaboration. What does that mean to you?
I think for me, it's making time for other people and being present in that time, no matter how short that is. And as much as possible, connecting people. You know, I think Pinky is amazing at that. Just seeing the connections and seeing the possibilities well before you can even see them yourself.
Is there anything that scares you?
Getting sick. I do too much, always. It's my natural personality to overload myself. Yesterday I wanted to get a workout in before I got home because I knew by the time I got home I wouldn't have any time because I had to do bed part time and bath time. And so I did a 20-minute workout in the disabled loo at work. I kid you not. Yeah, I'm totally serious.
Oh my goodness.
I've been in work at 3 a.m. I was in work at 3 a.m. on Monday. I took a conference call at 5 a.m. this morning. You know, I think I say my default is yes. And maybe this is my failure. I wish I could get better at saying no with kindness and collaboration.
What's left on your to-do list?
I want to do more on TV. And, you know, you asked me about the comedy side of things. I think there is a place for a kind of news review show, a bit like The Day Today was in the 90s, which is comedy but with an edge. So in the future, maybe that's where I'll be. Not in the immediate future, but I'd like another baby. That's not really a to-do list. I view that too much as a
fairly big thing.
Yeah, and I think of those things in terms of achievements and failures, and that's something I'm working on.
It's been brilliant speaking to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for it. It's lovely to chat to you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Women of the Future podcast. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, why not give us a rating and review? You know you want to. For more about the Women of the Future Awards, network and initiative, please visit www.womenofthefuture.co.uk. See you soon.